Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading property experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, and Ben Kingsley, Chair of Property Investment Professionals of Australia, and the 2014 and 2015 Property Investment Advisor of the Year.
All right, folks, you're on the Property Couch, where each week Ben and I bring you the insider's guide to property investing. Hello, mate.
G'day, mate. I'm a bit tired this morning.
Hey, what's that?
Because I've been watching the Olympics. I've been watching the men's basketball team.
Did you stay up and watch it?
Stayed up just like I did the night before. So the last two nights, I think I've averaged about 4.5 hours sleep. Oh. So I watched the Opals against, I can't even think who it was. I've erased that from my mind. It was so frustrating. So to the girls, they must be absolutely distraught because that was a game that they should have won. They're just... I'm sure they're ruining their opportunity as well. They got caught up in the whole moment and they got outpsyched. Then I get there and watch the men play Lithuania, who
is a bogey side.
Yep, and ranked third in the world coming into the Olympics. Yep. Okay, and we tidied them up by around 26 points. Wow. So to
shout out to
Andrew and Maddie and to Paddy Mills and to all the rest of the crew. You guys are superstars. So America has just finished playing Argentina and America have won. So they play Spain in the semi-finals. And we most likely will play Serbia or Croatia. Now, we beat Serbia in the round robin games. So we could be playing off for a gold medal against. We are up and about. So
are we angling for free tickets here? Because we know that the boys
fly over there, you reckon?
Yeah.
But by this time next week, we will know how they went.
Well, our listeners will know that Andrew Bogut will ring you and give you a ticket. And then
no, he won't.
You won't.
I'm a nobody.
You won't invite me.
He is a podcast listener, so is Matty Deliver Davis. So thanks, lads. But
good luck.
Yes, all the best, guys. And job. Great effort. It all comes from the defence you boys are playing. That's where it's coming from. Yeah. That transition ball is very good.
Hey, we haven't talked footy for a while, so clearly this is a welcome distraction.
Well, no, but I just think, they're doing a great job over there, and I pity for the girls because they could have also, medalled as well. So I think they've realised that they've a missed opportunity for them. All right, what are we on to today?
Mate, we've a couple of things. 500,000. Doesn't that sound like a wonderful number?
It does. 500,000 what?
Downloads.
Oh, beauty.
500,000 downloads, Ibis. Can you believe it? And we started out this podcast on your little Samsung smartphone, which
is still here,
still on the desk as a backup. But now we've got this professional microphone, and we've got this
even then we still get people
studio here in North Melbourne.
Our volume of our voice going up,
doesn't go down. But 500,000 downloads. That's a special thanks to our listeners because they've spread the word, Ben. We have. We don't do much advertising at all of this podcast. No. It's all word of mouth. We've got over 160 5-star reviews on iTunes, which is just phenomenal. So,
and what's the other one we're on? SoundCloud. Is that what it's called?
Yep.
So if you SoundCloud, iTunes, wherever you can grab us on our website.
We always ask the favour, folks, if you are enjoying our podcast, if you can just tell one person. We'd love for you to tell 10, but effectively, if you could just tell one other person.
And give us a 5-star rating.
And give us a 5-star rating. And buy the book.
All right, that's
only serious.
Self-indulgent. That's too much self-indulgent.
And then, just the last piece of self-indulgence is the game of property is out.
Yes.
It's out. Now, we might have to explain this game of property.
Yeah, a lot of people think, where's the board game? Well, it hasn't come yet, but you never know. We might do a board game.
It's on the horizon. However, it's like it's metaphoric. It's like the game of life.
Correct.
That we play. This is the game of investing. So we try to keep it intriguing. We try to keep the curiosity approach of the fact that property investing, unlike buying a house for yourself to live in, is actually plays under a different set of rules.
Correct, and you can play it on different levels. Just like in golf, you can be a weekend hack, you can be an amateur, or you can be a professional. And in the game of property investing, the whole idea is about getting an outperform result. It's about getting the best return you possibly can for your money, because at the end of the day, that's going to build your wealth and it's going to build your passive income. So that is the metaphoric way of us saying the game of property is about understanding all the moving parts and all the variables and all the players that impact the game. And so it's a great video. I'm proud of it. Hopefully you can check it out.
So obviously they can check it out by going to Facebook. They can check it out by going to YouTube. And they can check it out by going to website.
The website. Oh, you almost heard her voice for the first time on the podcast.
She's a stig. We would have had to put the helmet on if she talked. But and you can go to thepropertycouch.com.au. Hey, I got a call from Veronica yesterday.
Yep.
She loved being on the couch. She got some great feedback for being on the couch. Cool. A few people have telephoned her to have a chat. So
excellent.
Obviously good to spread the love. She's obviously a great property investor.
Good operator.
It's great for you two to finally meet.
Yeah, that's strange, isn't it? After a couple of years.
Hey, Ben, in the market, it's been a very... You a couple of podcasts ago, you said winter is coming.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't sure how prophetic that was because as a buyer's agent, winter was a very, very lean time for stock.
Yep.
And talking to agents in the field, some elite agents were saying it's their worst listing season for 5 years.
Yeah.
And that's effectively because in some cases there was 300 and 400 properties less for sale on a Saturday than the same weekend the previous year.
Yeah.
And what that meant is that there'd been some, for any of our listeners who are in the Melbourne or the Sydney markets, and anyone who thinks that winter is a bad time to sell your home has never sold in winter because you know, it's in the bigger markets there's still lots of people interested, smaller competition which creates competition
demand
for properties, but still the same competition for auction bidding means that they got a good result. So what it meant was there's been some pretty interesting results, Ben. And by interesting, I say probably paying over the odds. From we were at an auction, our team, where we were one of 4 buyers agents, and all 4 of us, and that's 4 independent, not 4 from our team. Were all the underbidders and someone else had paid. And that's unusual to be at an auction where there's 4 buyers agents and one of those 4 doesn't take home the chocolates. It's been an interesting time.
Yeah, I had an interesting case. I was bidding at an auction a couple of weekends ago, and same thing. I suited up. I thought I'll go and suit up. This is an owner-occupied property for a friend of mine. And I appraised it, knew what it was going. There was a absolutely superior property, 6 houses up. Definitely superior, sold in April for $965, and this is a couple of weeks ago. So there's no way knowing this property was worth more than $935.
Melbourne or Sydney?
Melbourne,
yeah.
Melbourne, okay. And so I got there, I'm suited up, where the bidding's going, it's getting tighter, and then I always wonder about these owner-occupiers because when they see the professionals go out, and then, because they would have known I was a buyer's agent, it was pretty clear, the way I presented myself with the tape.
You had your Collingwood scarf on.
No, I had this big badge that said buyer's agents in Powell. Yeah. No, that's not true. But the point I'm making
it was true. You did have a badge.
No, I didn't have the badge on. All of a sudden, these 2 just went toe-to-toe, one on the phone with his wife and the other guy up the back, and I'm thinking, and they took it to $960 it sold for. And I am just like, seriously? Like so you've just made that house that sold 3 months ago probably worth 1.05. That's how much difference there was. I mean, I had a stretch at 930. It wasn't worth 9. So I had this stretch in the tank. So it just goes to show you, we're seeing results out there that aren't great, which leads into what we wanted to have a bit of a yarn about today. We've also been getting some feedback from people who listen to the podcast. They're sort of saying, well, if I don't have 1.5 million, if I don't have $1 million to invest, you keep talking about being close to the city and trying to drive, scarcity, convenience, lifestyle drivers, those types of things. Well, those fundamentals are real. But we also know that there's this concept of wave riding. And if you've read our book, it's a big part of, the 18 strategies that we've got. So I wanted to just talk to that today for a few minutes around explaining to people this concept of when you're investing, you've got to think of the right strategy in the right market at the right time. Now, you've heard us talk about borderless investing and about being in different marketplaces. So that's about making sure from a timing point of view that you don't commit yourself to a heated market. And when you do have a heated market in, say, some of those inner city locations, the reality is, and the research shows us, that some of the better performing locations in terms of percentage price growth can actually occur in that second ring around the city. So if it's not that sort of 0 to 5, 0 to 7 kilometres, it can be that 7 to 10, 7 to 12 kilometre band. And so there are potentially great opportunities there as people get priced out of that bigger market. Now, if you think of this like a pyramid, and if you can visualise this, at the bottom of the pyramid, there is more people. There is more audience. There are more buyers in that, which means from an affordability point of view, that's where you'll get most of your buyers. So if I have a $400,000 property, most people can afford that given minimum wages in Australia. If I have a $1.5 million property, obviously the pyramid gets a little thinner in terms of the rarer air. And that's when we start to relate that to the scarcity of the property. So the scarcity and the character in the property gives the property some currency, some intrinsic value. But we can also pick ugly ducklings and reliable and durable properties in that 7 to 10 kilometre, 7 to 12 kilometre bandwidth away from the city. So in some cases, we might say right strategy is maybe, strong capital growth, and we might go into a different market. So we might go, say, Adelaide or even Hobart or wherever there's a major city. There is always scarce assets with beautiful character and owner-occupier appeal, and they will always be prized properties that are hard to replicate, hard to duplicate, and really have true scarcity and low supply. But what I wanted to talk about today is still the concept of this 7 to 12 kilometre bandwidth has usually fully, and in some cases in the bigger cities, like in Sydney, we're talking effectively up to 25 clicks from the city.
Melbourne,
and then you've got the sub-cities like Parramatta and Chatswood and North Sydney. So you've got these rings that stretch out off that. And in Melbourne, we've got this sort of Melbourne, and then we've got St Kilda Road. So that's but in the next 20 years, it's going to be Port Melbourne and down Fisherman's Bend and all that sort of area. So we're going to expand our city into a very large metropolis. So if you take this sort of patented ring approach, you can start to see that when people get priced out of the 900 million mark, they go to the next suburb, and that's what the clients that I'm working with at the moment are looking to do, and they're not out of the race. Now that said, the things that we've got to look for, you've still got to study the demographic, and you might find in these neighbouring suburbs that the income's really still strong, that the age is right in terms of 35 to 45, that they've got what sort of composition of work or employment do they have, managerial, executives versus labourers and those types of things. And once you start laying that over, you can see that there are some really good ones, and then there's some ones that are like, no, that's probably still got another 3 or 4 years before it starts to gentrify. So you can be very particular about the suburbs that you pick in that second band. And that's the message that I have. And so that's what we've been adopting in our business in terms of how we've been looking after our clients. The land is still fully utilised. So in other words, there's no vacant blocks. And we're looking then at the composition of the number of owner-occupied homes. So then I look at the demographics and say, well, how many people are living there? In other words, I'm looking for families. I'm not necessarily looking for non-children households, because you'll find that when you get lots of units and those types of things in the mix, then there'll be a lot of that type of family, a lot of that type of composition of household. But when you've just got rows and rows of, say, 500 or 600 square metre blocks of dirt and houses built on them, and some are post-war 1960s builds, 1950s builds, and then you've got this established benchmark of around 1.2 million, 1.3 million, and you've got 30 or 40 houses in that range, you have got a really good market that you can cherry pick an ugly duckling or reliable and durable property.
Yeah, because the prize assets, as we even only 6 months ago, $750 in Melbourne will get you a really beautiful period home, single fronted, 2-bed in a ring. Now that needs to be sort of $850 to $900. So, and the question is, it's always about land, location, and looks. And I'm a fan of certain flats. Not apartments, but flats as being good. But if I've still got the alternative to buy something that's in that area that you're talking about, in that middle ring, that 10 to 20 ring, that's got a train line, that's got an established village, that...
Great point, the lifestyle drivers.
There's precedent where you're already starting to see some of those houses being turned over into 2 or 3 townhouses. So it's already starting to gentrify in that regard. You can, at that price point, I mean, if you've got the budget, you still want to be, because this is one of the a bit of feedback we've been getting from the podcast listeners, but it's confusing to say, shouldn't we always be in the 10 kilometre? Yes, if you can afford it.
Yeah.
Because there's huge scarcity, all of the things we've talked about for 75 episodes all exist there. But some people, if they're faced with the decision of spending $600,000 on a 2-bedroom apartment somewhere, or flat, or they can go into another area which gives them some land that they can land bank. Because Bernard Salt is one of Australia's leading demographers.
He is.
He's talked about the Sydney, in terms of population size being in order, 2014, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, Adelaide, and then the Gold Coast number 6. Fast forward to 2050, Sydney, Melbourne, still the same in that order, only just. But then Perth overtakes Brisbane, and so they swap spots, and Adelaide stays 5th and the Gold Coast stays 6th. So, but in terms of real numbers in Melbourne, currently in 2014, 4.4 million.
Yep.
By 2050, 7.6 million. So that's an increase of 3.23. That's a 73% increase of what. So I always think of it from the analogy, and I was talking to the guys yesterday here, that I come from Perth with a population of about 2 million.
Yep.
And then you come to Melbourne. When I first came to Melbourne, I must admit, I was like the little kid in the big city. It's like, whoa, there is so much going on here. That's the analogy that people need to think about with our cities moving forward, because 4.4 becoming 7.6 is going to be the same feeling that I had when I come from Perth to Melbourne. You can do it every day now. If a Perth person moved to Melbourne, see how big it is. That's what Melbourne, that's the context of what Melbourne's going to be like. That huge change. And so where are these people going to live? So we've got to think about that long-term perspective when we're buying, because the minutiae of buying an investment property, it's really easy to get stuck in the detail. Our good friend Peter Kaluzos always says, when someone's buying a house, they do it very simply. Does it feel good? Is it practical? And is my friends around the corner? Whereas we as investors, we unpack this, we unpack that. And fair enough, because it's a big decision. But ultimately, there's just going to be an enormous amount of change, an enormous amount of population moving to the city. And so we need to forward think that a little bit, because if you, again, I've said this a couple of times, you think to my dad, his idea of the great Australian dream is the quarter-acre block with a detached house surrounded by a garden with a hills hoist and a barbecue. Whereas you talk to Ivis's generation, they'd be quite happy to be in an apartment. So that's shifted. So we've got to shift to think where our cities are going to expand to. And you always talk about the fact that you go to these bigger cities like in China and Japan. And what did you say, 100 square metres?
100 kilometres squared. There's 23 million people that live in Beijing.
Oh, Beijing. Yeah.
Beijing. So that's one city, and that's not the biggest city in China. That's the population of Australia. Another little bit of gold for our listeners.
Ooh.
So in our business, when we're researching areas, so this sort of gives people a little bit of a guide, and it's just a rough guide, but in terms of Sydney, we'll look at upwards of 500 suburbs. In Melbourne, we'll look at around 350 suburbs. In Brisbane, I think we're looking at around sort of 160 to 200 at the moment. In Adelaide, we're talking about 60. In Perth, we're talking about 120 to 150 because the suburbs are a little bit bigger over there and the population's a little bit more sparse. In Hobart, as an example, it's 10. So, and everyone goes, but why would you go to that market? And I say, because there's still we've got some, we've got a great anaesthetist client who lives down in Hobart, and he's on very good income, and he's not alone. There are people in that market who are quite wealthy, and there's a lot of money, but we are very particular about what we're trying to find in those markets, where we will get a character asset that's very hard to replicate, has intrinsic value, and it's in the status pocket for that market. Because tell me, what does Adelaide's population grow by, Bryce, between now? So what have we got, Adelaide? You've just handed me the piece of paper. So 1.3 million people in Adelaide at the moment will turn into almost 1.8 million. So 500,000 people more would be moving to Adelaide. So everyone says, Adelaide, they have this generic big picture view of a city, and then they just lock themselves out of the idea of investing there. Well, you're doing yourself an injustice as a borderless investor. Remember, right strategy in the right market at the right time. And in some cases, like let's say the blue chip proven performer, rare earth $1 million strip strategies that we talk about in the book, if we want to go and buy those in Melbourne or Sydney at the moment, we are competing against 13 or 14 other buyers 10 of which are owner-occupiers, and they are paying an emotional price at the peak of the market, and they've got FOMO written all over their forehead, fear of missing out. And we are not doing the right thing by our clients to be buying that asset. We would much prefer to buy that asset in the next cycle downturn when we might only have 2 or 3 competitors. That's the message that we're making there, and we'll probably pick it up for what it's sold for today in 18 months' time. And
we want to be in front of the wave. When you're paddling for a wave as a surfer, you want to be in the sweet spot. That's the same, because whilst everyone's being distracted by these big blue chip properties, if you can look into the Ripple suburbs, and as your location analyzer does, it allows us to see that visually. Means you can get ahead of the game. I think there's some gold there, listeners, that Ben just mentioned, because when someone and I was guilty of it many moons ago shout out to the Adelaide people, but you kind of just went, Adelaide, really? But when you go there, mate, there's just unbelievably beautiful homes, like ridiculously beautiful homes, and the point is that what you made is you're not buying Adelaide.
No.
You're actually buying a house in Unley. Or I don't know if anyone's driven through Medindi Gardens or Medindi in Adelaide. That's their blue ribbon stuff. Beautiful. Oh. So there's doctors, there's dentists, there's lawyers, there's solicitors, there's accountants, there's high income people who live in Adelaide. And some people, with all respect to Adelaide, some people just say that I don't want to live in Adelaide.
Yep.
But there are people who do.
There will be people over the next generation, Bryce, who will say, 7 million people in Melbourne, far too busy for me.
I'm off to Adelaide.
I'm off to Adelaide for a more work-life balance, which is a bit what happens in Brisbane. Once people sort of say, what do you mean I'm on the fringes of Sydney's city in the outer west and I'm about to spend an hour and a half going to and from work and that's only going to get worse as population grows. And I can
for the privilege of $1 million average mortgage.
for $1 million mortgage on an outer suburb property. Yep. I can go into Brisbane and have a better quality of life for me and my family. Go back to that image of the kids playing cricket in the street. Just a little bit slower pace. And yeah, okay, my income's potentially going to drop by 10 or 15%. But in relative terms, I'm 30% lower from an affordability point of view than what I am in a big city and Melbourne basin. So we know that there will be this migration of people that will go into those areas. And we're looking, and then you see houses in those markets for 300, 400, 500,000, and you just go, cheap, because you're taking that long-term view. So we still want to time it right. We don't want to be sitting on cheap now and it's still cheap in 5 years. But we take a view of buying counter-cyclical, where the next 18 months to 36 months, we think we're getting in before the market wakes up and says, oh, those boys were right.
Ben, what about this? Hobart is a very good point, by the way. So Hobart at 2014 is the number 11 city, 219,000, right?
Yep.
But then it goes as it drops down to the 13th city by 2050, right? It gets overtaken by a couple, right?
Newcastle, probably.
Geelong and Townsville.
Okay,
interesting.
There you go, Geelong and Townsville. Yep.
But the thing is, it goes from, Hobart goes from 219 to, let me get this right, 265. So it goes up by 46,000 people. So you go, well, that's not a big number.
No.
But 46,000 in those 10 suburbs that you're thinking of, placing enormous, they want to be there first and then they'll go out to where their affordability is.
Yep.
How can they not grow?
Yeah, how can those elite, 10 suburbs not, if I'm successful in a city, this is that human interest, human behaviour, so this is that psychology, the buyer. If I've made it in my town, I want that dream home that I can have the dinner parties at in the nice streets and the nice suburbs. I mean, Warney just paid, what did he pay, $15 million to buy his old property back in Brighton? So that's a status thing. That's a status play, and it's really important. But, so take, for example, Geelong is another example there. If we get a fast train, like a true fast train, which we will get because, it's got the surf coast. So there's another example where there's, literally 5 suburbs in Geelong that we keep an eye on. And we say to ourselves, look, if we're going to go down to these markets, we're going to get a little bit more yield and we're not going to have the buzz that's happening up in Melbourne, but that'll change, And if I can get to from one city to the next in 30 minutes on a fast train, well, that changes everything.
Mate, Geelong's a big performer. Mate, Geelong grows 64%. It goes from 184 to 300. It's, that's enormous.
It is.
Yeah. So the message here, folks, is you're not buying a suburb, you're not buying a state, you're not buying a capital city. You're buying a property that a person would aspire to live in, or the tenant's going to move into that spot. So always remember that we're not buying a city. When someone says don't buy an apartment in Melbourne, you can't buy an apartment in Melbourne.
Yep.
Because you can't buy the whole market.
No.
You have to buy a specific property in a localised street in a localised neighbourhood with a person that moves into it. And that's important because that's often lost, I reckon.
Oh, it is. And I think if we then sort of summarise the point, there are absolute blue chip locations and they will remain blue chip. We've talked about this before. There's very little that will change. I can't even think of anything that could change other than a rising sea level that takes the suburb into the ocean. But there would be no other thing that I could say would turn a blue chip into a poorer suburb. That's it. It's locked. But then you've got these green chips that are turning into blue chips, which is the gentrification story. And that's what we're talking about today. These are suburbs that will race up to that higher end value. So you'll get a greater percentage return over the short term that even some of the blue chip suburbs that on a percentage point of view won't be able to achieve. Now that being said, I'd be very happy for my $3 million blue chip property to turn to $4 million because that's $1 million in real cash as opposed to my $450,000 property turning into $550, that's obviously a greater percentage, but I'm only taking $100,000 out. But that's the point I'm making. We've got to make sure that all of our audience understands that there's opportunity at each of your household income price points. Yep. That's been a big message of us. It's a big message in our book. It doesn't matter whether you're bringing home a $500,000 salary or you're bringing home household income combined of $80,000. We know that there's a better way, and there's different strategies and different ways in which you can slice the onion that will get you the result that you need to get.
Mate, I think you're very elite at this stuff. I'm lucky to be around you because we get to press the flesh on this stuff all the time. But as a framework for our listeners, the house in the blue chips is your number one. If you can't afford that, I'd still probably chase a really good quality townhouse.
Correct.
And once you can't afford that, then I'd actually move back to a house in the next ring of suburbs. And then once you can't afford that, then you go to the flats back in the proven performance. I'd kind of, as a rough framework.
Well, and that's really what we articulate in the game of property.
Yep.
So check out the video, guys, because we haven't talked about the variables that influence it. But if you haven't listened or watched the video yet, because it's a video, it's not an audio, you'll be able to see the cards that we place up on the walls and the considerations that we make. Because it's an observational science. It's not an exact science, and we're trying to predict the better areas, and that's what it is. It's all about trying to get a better result for your money.
Very good. And while we're talking about paradigm changes, Ben, I've got a quick listener question here.
Sure. Bit of Q&A. Love it.
Hi, Ivis.
Who? Well, wait.
Not hi, Ben and Bryce. It's hi, Ivis. It's from Maria. We know Maria. We helped her buy a property.
Yeah.
It's hi, Ivis.
Oh.
So the stick's got another mention. Love the podcast and the book. Well-deserved success with both. How do you draw the line? And this is a good one for everyone, I reckon. How do you draw the line between good cash flow management and depriving yourself of things you enjoy? My husband and I have always lived within our means, and we now have 2 properties under our belt in Sydney with plans to buy more. We are in our 30s. But I found that as we've come along the investment journey, I've become increasingly preoccupied with spending less. I have no issues with buying necessities, paying bills, or paying for those things that benefit our investing or our health. I don't blink an eye at spending on insurances, BA fees, etc., because those things are useful and necessary. However, when contemplating discretionary lifestyle purchases, often costing less than $100, stuff you don't need but want, I spend weeks analysing whether to buy to the extent that I'm spending too much energy on it. I guess I worry that if I spend 100 here and 100 there, I'll just eat away at our cash buffers. What are your personal real-life experiences with discretionary spending? And while trying to build a property portfolio, did you or your family buy your toys and vices freely, or did you find yourself analysing every purchase? I want to have the best cash flow position possible, but I want to have occasional frivolous luxuries too. I know I need some sort of mindset shift, but what does that shift look like? Kind regards, Maria.
So Maria and James, they're a lovely couple that we've been looking after, and very astute, really solid. Great listeners, great students of what we teach, and so it's a joy to work with them. So this can be dangerous. I've seen the extremities of what this looks like, and I use an example of a person who lived in Melbourne who drove around in an old Mercedes, sort of Benz, and I'm talking.
I think you mentioned a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and he's got this, box of keys and just get you. So, for me, it was like, well, how many do you need? How many more? I met him one day and he wanted more money to buy more properties, and I'm like, so it had become his hoarding. In a sense, his mind had shifted so much that it was all about how many more he could have, and he lost the sense of life. Lost the joy of what that means and what money can give you.
If you Google hoarders, they generally, because I've had to do that on the show, because I've done a number of hoarders, they're perfectionists. They're afraid of making a decision, so they don't make a decision at all. And then they just keep their stuff. They don't know how to get rid of it. So it sounds like there's a potential here to be a perfectionist around making those financial decisions, because it's called financial anorexia.
Yeah.
So you've got to find that right blend between... because you've got to remember what it's all about. I've said it a number of times, it's Tim Ferriss, you want your time back and you want your experiences. So you have to find minimum effective dose. And if you don't spend above your means, I would suggest that you probably need to allow for some of the luxuries in life, because it's where you're overspending and you're not in control of your destiny. That's where you're in trouble. But these guys are in control of their destiny. They know where they're headed. They know what they need to buy. So I would say that this here there's a potential for them to forget what it's all about. Because our motto in the business is build a wealthier tomorrow whilst enjoying a better today.
Correct.
And we can't forget enjoying the better today.
Yeah, so obviously I know the backstory, okay? And the backstory of everyone is a powerful element of what drives us forward. It can be an inhibitor, or it can be something that releases us to be the best that we can be. But once we address what are our motivations and what are our value sets, we can then start to take action. You know, my backstory in the book I talk about, you know, Dad was, you know, very conscious of money and Mum was a spender. So there was always this animosity around money in the household. And I just thought, I don't want to be in a situation where money, you know, determines the happiness in the household. Meter. Yeah. So effectively that's my backstory. You know, and there's other people who have those backstories who are very determined to reset the wealth base in their household and build on that legacy. So I completely get that. But I also say that, you know, Steve Jobs, he didn't take the money with him, you know, and ultimately he can reflect on his life in terms of what he did in terms of purpose. But if you ask his family what he did, well, he sacrificed some things to get what he wanted. And so, you know, that's the message we have here. We encourage, when you're doing your budgets, to put some discretionary spending in there. We don't believe that you should be all tight, no play. It should be all about a balance. And some ways in which you can overcome this mindset change is to set some short-term goals around, if we get to this point of money in bank, then I'm going to set aside $1,000 for those little items, so I'm not going to stew over them. You know, you'd be amazed how many people that I know in our basketball club who spend literally 3 or 4 days analysing the cheapest flat screen TVs to save $80 or whatever. When it's like, well, that time is valuable. So put time value on your money. Sorry, put a money value on your time. That might sound a bit better. And then try and work from that to sort of say, look, you know, you don't want to be stressing out on those things. And if you put it into your cash flow budget, spend it because it's there.
Good stuff, Ben. Because Maria, I would say to you, if you've got money smarts under control and you've implemented that system, then you could allocate a certain amount. Now, everyone knows Zig Ziglar's one of my favourites.
Oh, he's a ripper.
He said that he provided an account for his family, which was the no questions asked account.
Oh, nice.
And so effectively, he calls his wife Sugar Baby. She's the redhead. He's got all these beautiful sort of nicknames that he gives her. But he said, there's the account, and it's the no questions asked account. And if that might help her, there's the no questions asked amount, if they've got everything else under control. Because what you said before is you never see a hearse towing a trailer.
No.
So like you said, you're not taking it with you, so you've got to get that balance right. So, but I mean, really good question, because you can't...
Yeah, I think it's a great question.
You don't often get someone say, I'm preoccupied with spending less, because most people have the undisciplined pursuit of more rather than the disciplined pursuit of less.
So in Marie and James' case, we know they're going to be a success.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And they are going to be, you know, we'll be writing about them into the future about how amazing their results have been, because they're very focused. Just like, you know, we're seeing these elite athletes at the moment. They've dedicated their, 8 to 10 years to get to where they are at the peak of their powers. That's the laser focus that we're seeing with these guys, and so that's not a bad thing. But just like those athletes, you see them on their Twitter accounts. As soon as their game's over, they're off to Macca's and they're getting into the burgers, or the treats and the things that they've sacrificed. They're now rewarding themselves with a little bit of hair letting down and that type of thing. So no harm in doing that.
Too much gluten.
Gluten. Oh, that's right. Not enough grass. Yeah. I mean, not enough rabbit food.
Mate, I eat plenty of protein. So hopefully that's helped everyone out. I think that's a message for everyone. That got to get the balance right, Ben. Find the minimum effective dose.
Yep.
So a couple of things. Facebook Live chat.
Yes.
September 13th.
Yep.
Put it in your diary, folks. We're going to take questions on the night.
Is it a Tuesday night?
It's a Tuesday night.
Tuesday?
Mate,
Tuesday?
It's old school. Tuesday.
Tuesday
night. And we put a code in TPC. But now if you put FB Live, we're doing a very special price on the book leading up to the Facebook Live chat. 30% off the book, because we're going to go through the book. So if you need to have one in front of you so that you can ask some really cool questions. So we're going to focus on the 18 strategies. We'll open the batting with a few frameworks. And then we'll be taking your questions, folks. We'll spend 50% of the time taking your questions, so check that out. And Ben, the Pippa survey, quick one.
Yeah. So each year, the association that I'm the chair of does a market sentiment survey. So we get a snapshot of how property investors are feeling around the market. And it's the biggest survey of its kind in Australia. So we want to get as many people who are non-investors and investors completing that survey, because it'll give us insights into what people are looking at, what marketplaces they're looking at. So it's great from that point of view. It also then gives us some content to go to government with and sort of say negative gearing or whatever. These types of changes will impact on how we grow the economy and we keep people in jobs. So it also works as a lobbying tool for us. So I encourage you all to spend. It's 40 questions or 38 questions, so it's about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So if anyone's can find 10 minutes, just click on it. We don't ask your name, so you're anonymous, and we do income ranges. But you don't even have to complete that if you don't want to, but it just gives us a bit of an insight into what state you're in, if you've got an investment portfolio, if you don't, how you're going about it. So,
and is there a question that after 99 years you can release the data, or is it purely
we can release it, but it's not going to be known to anyone because there's no email addresses, we don't capture your email address. It's all completely anonymous.
Oh, you can use the ABS site then. You won't have to have any fear of being hacked. Very good, Ben. So why should someone bother? It's because they're going to get some awesome insights.
Yeah, and we publish that information. So all of the Pippa members get that. We'll also do some media on it to sort of show what those insights led to. It's obviously good for them to sort of see where people are buying, the types of asset that they're buying and the reasons why they're buying them. So, do you buy off the plan? Do you buy existing? So it just gives us a really good snapshot of what's happening in the Australian investor market at the moment.
And how can they fill it in?
They can go to the website, can they? And there'll be a link, or Facebook.
Our Facebook page?
Yep, go to our Facebook
there you go,
page.
Folks. The Property Couch, put a link. On Facebook, just like us. And you'll be able to fill in that survey. Ben said it'll take 10 minutes.
Or search on our website for Pippa Sentiment Survey.
It takes Ben 10 minutes, it'll take you 8 minutes. So there you go, folks. Very, very good. There we go. Another week's flown.
Wow. We had more questions. Yeah, so we'll have to do... Well, we were going to do risk next week, weren't we?
We are.
Yeah.
The 10 biggest risks in building your portfolio.
Yeah, 10 biggest risks in property investing. So I think it's important that, we talk a lot about success and all of that, but there are risks. So we're going to... We're going to unpack. We are going to unpack the 10 biggest risks when it comes to property investing. We're going to count them down.
Start at number 10?
Start at number 10. Right. 10 down to 1.
I'm excited.
So that's next week, but we do have some wonderful questions that we need to get to. Ian, your question's not far away. It's in our top list.
And did I tell you I'm on the Adelaide bandwagon? I'm going for Adelaide Crows in the finals.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So we've got to pick a team, do we? Yeah. All right, so who am I going to pick? I won't go Hawthorn.
No,
I'll keep
Hawthorn.
Sydney. I lived in Sydney for 10 years. Great city. I'll go Sydney.
Adelaide. The Stig has told us the Cats. Because Adelaide, thanks, Ivers. Adelaide has lost, so the top 4, Adelaide has lost Dangerfield to the Cats. They lost Gunston to the Hawks. And they lost Tippett to the Swans, and they're still there. So go Crows!
Says to me they don't have a great culture.
Go Crows!
You don't lose good people if you've got great culture.
They're going to write us in. So Freo can't win, and I want to see Crows win it. So there we go. All right, we're going to sign off.
Are we? Okay. Right. Now, this is a language, I believe, coming from my piece of paper. Tatar. Now, isn't that hilarious?
Yeah.
Tatar. Well, it's not Tatar is not the buy, that's the language.
But what I'm most interested in is what inflection you give it.
Yeah, well, I have no idea because I have no idea where it comes from. So if anyone knows T-A-T-A-R, Tatar, then we're going to, and here's the sign-off. In goodbye, it's Sobu.
Sobu?
Sobu.
All right.
Sobu. I can't do the others. That's the easiest one.
Exactly.
Sobu.
There you go, folks. If we're from Tatar, let us know.
I'm getting a quick little Tatar. No, it's not even coming up.
It's
obviously a dialect that maybe left us in the Roman Empire years. But anyway, I have no idea.
Bring out your history.
No.
So that.
It's Turkic. Turkic language.
Very good. Google.
So,
there you go, folks. We are going to sign off in Tatar, which again, Ben, is
Sobu.
Till next week, folks.
Sobu.